New video has revealed what the Cybertruck's frunk will look like when the front is fully open, and it's kind of weird, but also it looks like it might be very, very useful. Plus, Gary Black thinks that Tesla should buy Uber. Should they? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First, I wanted to touch on something really quick from yesterday's video about comparing the quartz crisis in the watch industry in the 1970s to the transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles right now. I think the problem was I thought this was so obvious I forgot to mention it. That can happen sometimes. But I believe that the quartz crisis is actually a better comparison than the phone transition. Everyone always talks about BlackBerry and Nokia getting disrupted by the iPhone, but actually those are very similar. They're both phones, they both have batteries. Yeah, one has chiclet keys and one doesn't and has a blank screen, but that's a pretty minor adjustment compared to the quartz crisis. You're going from a mechanical movement, which is potentially hundreds of parts that are all moving, being driven by a mainspring that has to be wound, lots and lots of complexity and very fine mechanical tolerances and stuff that has to be serviced all the time to make this all work, and it has to be serviced very frequently in order to keep functioning. Now compare that to a quartz watch, which just has a battery and just one moving part in the form of a motor that drives the second hand forward every second. And of course, I'm sure you can see the analogy between a gas engine, which has hundreds of parts, many of them moving, very fine tolerances, requires a great deal of engineering to make it work properly, and then a lot of maintenance to keep it working properly. And quite honestly, the fact that we expect to get 100,000+ miles out of these engines with only basic service, I mean, relatively speaking, is kind of a miracle of engineering and development over the last century. So no knock against the gas engine, just like no knock against mechanical watches. But an EV, just like a quartz watch, is the much better solution. A quartz watch has fewer moving parts. If you get a solar powered one, so it recharges itself, you never basically have to replace the battery. So it's just, you can seal it up and forget about it for over a decade. And of course, just like a quartz watch, an EV is so much simpler than a gas engine. So it's just a kind of a no-brainer that an EV would be the logical choice once batteries got good enough to be able to make EVs drive for long distances. And now let's turn to the Cybertruck, where we've got some sort of Bigfoot level footage of the frunk being open. This tweet is from Ray for Tesla, who is amazing, but I believe the original is actually some sort of a TikTok video, and I don't know what it is about TikTok, but the quality of their videos is atrociously bad. So anyway, if we play this, we can see that the quality of this video is terrible. But it gives us a really nice view of, and I'm going to turn off the sound here, gives us a really nice view of the frunk for a moment, and also shows a number of these that are obviously coming off the production line or something like that. So anyway, let's take a look at this freeze frame, which shows the frunk reasonably well. You can see, number one, that the frunk is very different than the Model 3, the Model Y, the Model S, Model X. It is not sort of down inside something. It's sort of a flat shelf-like thing. It's like a bench almost. In fact, I could actually see you sitting on it, assuming the bottom of it was reasonably solid, which it looks like it is. It also looks like it's a bit smaller than a lot of people thought. I think a lot of people thought that the frunk was going to be cavernous in a sense, but it looks somewhat smaller than I believe people had expected. But you've got to remember the scale of this vehicle is really big. And I'm going to show some pictures in just a second of it closed so you can get a sense of what it looks like when it's actually in the shape and how it opens. As far as usability is concerned, I believe this shape of the frunk is actually kind of ideal because it's like a flat shelf. It's not something where you have to reach in. So if you have heavy objects for work or whatever, you're just going to Lowe's and buying a generator or something that can fit in there, you can pick it up and you can put it straight in. You don't have to lift it over and drop it down inside. So that makes it much more useful. Also, if there is like a 120 outlet or a compressor outlet or something like that in there, you could drive tools directly from the frunk, so you don't have to back the truck in. You could put it in front forward if that's more convenient. And of course, the fact that it's got a flat bottom means that you can use it as a workspace. Again, potentially you could sit on it if you needed to, and you would be shaded from the sun, which would be very convenient if you're having to sit outside or something. But also you could put tools there, you could put tables on top of it. You can utilize it for a whole number of different purposes. So I think the shape is really interesting and potentially highly usable. However, given the flatness of it, I might not put a bunch of like bowling balls in there or something. I'm afraid something like that might bash against the front of the hood of the car, so I don't know. Anyway, the other part that people were talking about a lot was the fact that it looks to many people, not to me, that this frunk will not automatically open or close Some people are like, yeah, it'll open automatically, but it won't close automatically. I don't think that's correct. And I think we can tell from the fact that these arms are curved that lifts it up. So normally what there is a cantilevered thing, right? You have two of these things. And if you look at like a Model 3 trunk or something, you can see one pushes against the other one and that one opens up the trunk of the vehicle. Here you don't have two cantilevered arms on each side. You just have one. But I believe that gives you the ability to use a direct drive type of motor to drive it both up and down. And I did a quick search on Google, and I'm sure I'm not looking for the right terms or something, but if you imagine this brass bar with little teeth on it or something, and then that sort of pin that's in there would spin, it would move itself through the teeth, right? It would actually cause the thing to go up and down using the teeth on that arm. And of course, it could go both directions depending on which way the motor was turning. So I believe we're looking at something like that when we look at this curved arm. We've got some sort of actuator inside here, which is able to turn both directions, and it kind of pulls it down and then pushes it up as it goes. And that's internal, and that's the reason why that is actually a bent arm rather than a straight arm. I personally can't believe with a technological powerhouse or marvel or whatever Elon Musk called it, was a technological something showcase. Anyway, I can't believe with that sort of a vehicle in mind that they would have this thing spring loaded so it would just spring open and then you would have to manually shut it, especially at that height. If you were short, you wouldn't even be able to reach the top of that thing. So I'm very convinced that this thing is going to automatically open and close itself. Again, using a direct drive actuator inside the vehicle. So let's turn back to some pictures of the Cybertruck with that front hood closed so you can't see the frunk anymore. From the front, it looks very reasonable. Obviously, the light bar is on the part that actually goes up, which is really interesting. So since the whole thing rises all the way down to here where the camo ends and all the way up to the windshield up here, this entire front area comes out. So even though it looks a little bit small in the perspective of this picture here, it looks kind of small, but remember, we're looking at that at a very, very severe angle. So if we look at it from here, you can see that this is very, very wide actually. And so it is going to be maybe not super, super deep, but it's going to be a very, very wide frunk. And then from the side here, sorry, this isn't the greatest picture in the world, but I really like this camo. But you can see that the frunk will open somewhere here up this line and then up here to where the windshield wiper starts. So this whole area right here will lift up and out. It's a relatively small area, right? So what you're trading off for is depth for width. You're going to have a lot of width, not that much depth for this, mostly because this dashboard is ridiculously long. If you look at the interior picture of the Cybertruck, there's like this huge amount of glass that just goes, and there's this gigantic deck in front of where the steering wheel is. And again, if we switch back here, you can sort of see that here, how big the glass is and everything. So anyway, you're getting a relatively squatty frunk, but it's tall, so you can fit some tall things if they're flat, and it's very, very wide. So you're trading off. But the thing I like the best about it is the fact that it's flat as well. So it's not something where you have to lift things in and out like you do with the other Tesla vehicles. I think this is going to be a very, very usable and useful shape for people to have, and that they will actually utilize this frunk more than people do in the other Tesla vehicles. For a sort of mundane, basic example, take groceries. Rather than to have to open the tonneau cover in the back, roll it up, put the stuff in the back of the truck with this gigantic bed and have the groceries rolling around and everything, it'd be much more convenient just to place like 5 or 6 bags of groceries in this frunk area. Pop it open remotely, very, very easy. Put the stuff in, close it, drive off. It's right in the front, so as you park, you don't have to back up your car to get the groceries there, right? So if you're doing kind of a daily or weekly grocery shopping thing and you don't need that much room, this would be a fantastic use of that space. And it would be much more convenient than using the back if the back is covered, or, you know, having to roll down the lid and all of that kind of stuff and put the gate down. So this, in a way, even though the shape is weird and a lot of people are off put by this right now, I think this is actually kind of a genius design. And that's everything from just basically going shopping all the way to being on a construction site or something and being able to use this, especially if it's got outlets in the front, like a 120 volt outlet or a pressure outlet or something like that. So you could drive a nail gun or something out of the front of the vehicle as opposed to the back. And as Scott Walter pointed out to me last night as we were talking, he's like, this thing is going to have heavy duty gaskets. And I believe, again, Bigfoot footage here, so it's really difficult to see, but I believe that is a really heavy gasket around the front because, of course, if this thing is going to be amphibious to any extent, it's going to have to completely reject project water out of these types of areas, which is also good because you don't want your groceries or whatever's in there to get wet. In addition, even if you don't drive this thing on a lake or something, and by the way, I think if this thing is amphibious, a lot of people are going to be taking it out on the lake, maybe not the ocean. I don't know about that. Although honestly, it looks like Elon wants to be able to go between Boca Chica and South Padre Island, which is about a half a kilometer or something, 500 or 600 meters. That's what Scott told me. At least I haven't actually checked that. But anyway, that's salt water. That seems a little bit scary, but certainly out on the lake, why not just take this thing down a boat ramp and drive it around for a while? It would be people would talk. It would be a pretty cool thing. But anyway, if you're going to do that, you've got to have this frunk be completely sealable because you can't have water leaks in there. So it looks like there is at least evidence of a pretty heavy duty gasketing system that's going on around the front of this thing. And hopefully this direct drive system will not only close it, but sort of clinch it down so it's really, really locked against the gasket to keep it watertight. Then one more thing about the Cybertruck here. Cybertruck last night at Giga Texas being loaded onto an enclosed trailer. So that is interesting. We're not talking about a semi-truck yet that's, carting off 100 of them someplace, but clearly they're taking it somewhere a relatively long distance in order to do some test driving. So who knows where that is? Maybe it'll be in like Moab or something like that. They'll be off-roading it in Moab. I don't know. Anyway, that's total speculation and a total guess. But anyway, I think that's really, really cool. And speaking of Giga Texas, don't forget to get the Don't Mess with Tesla shirt. That's available in the merch store. It's got the Texas flag on it and everything. Seems very appropriate right now with Cybertrucks coming off the line in Texas as we speak. And finally today, let's turn to a tweet from Gary Black. Not sure why Tesla doesn't just buy Uber to get into autonomous ride hailing and get all the data from its platform of 137 million consumers who take 25 million trips per day. Elon Musk, Martin Vieja. So this is let's call this a contentious suggestion. I think Alexandra down there actually expresses it reasonably well. Gary, we are both old enough to remember some Wall Street geniuses advising Apple to buy Sony's because they had a Walkman. Then it was BlackBerry, horrible advice. Gary then responded, "You're mistakenly thinking about the hardware. Tesla gets the data from 25 million rides per day." To which I replied, Tesla gets this data already if the driver is leasing a Hertz Tesla, or frankly just owns a Tesla. Don't forget that Tesla is collecting all this data, and any Hertz Tesla that is being rented out or leased to an Uber driver, Tesla knows about that, and they are able to collect that data. So don't underestimate what Tesla is doing with this, and Uber might be actually thinking about that right now too. They might be like, wait, we may have made a mistake in this, because there could be 100,000 of these out there. Let's just say there's 10 or 15,000 of these out there right now, which I think is very, very conservative because a lot of Uber drivers are taking advantage of this deal. If that is the case, these folks are putting on hundreds of miles per day of driving because they're Uber drivers. And that means that Tesla is collecting this data. Yeah, it's not 25 million rides per day, but it could be on the order of 100,000 rides per day or something like that, right? Each Uber driver, say 10 rides per day. And even again, super conservatively, if there's only 10,000 of these on the road, that's 100,000 rides per day. Yeah, that's 2 orders of magnitude less than Uber is getting, but that is enough for Tesla to figure out how all of this stuff is working and kind of reverse engineer this. The big thing is, if Uber was worth, let's say, $4 or $5 billion, I would say, yeah, like really good idea. But it sounds like their valuation is somewhere on the order of $140 billion right now. That's an insane amount of money for Tesla to spend just to get some data that I believe that they could get themselves and they can reverse engineer. So I really like Gary Black, and I think he's got really interesting points. And I actually really like the fact that he even suggested this. I just think that this is not a particularly good use of Tesla's money. Yeah, they have a lot of cash in the bank, but I would rather that they invested in a big supercompute cluster. I'd rather that they invested in another factory or 10 factories for that amount of money. I'd rather they invested in new battery technology and full self-driving staff, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things you can do for $144 billion. So I think that there are better uses than purchasing Uber. Plus the fact they could even get into an issue of monopoly eventually. If Tesla solves full self-driving and they have everything, like there's no competition in terms of ride hailing and stuff, and they have their own fleet, that could actually cause them some antitrust issues, at least in the United States, if not other countries. So they probably want to keep Uber and Lyft and companies like that at arm's length a little bit in order to maintain the fact that there is competition in the marketplace. Will they eventually crush these other ones or subsume them? Yes. They're either going to get put out of business once there's driverless taxi hailing because it's going to be so much cheaper, or they're going to have to come to Tesla and license that themselves, but that's for a future date. So anyway, much respect to Gary, and very, very intriguing, but I think Tesla can do this on their own. I don't think they need Uber. And again, if it was just a few $1 billion that Uber was valued at, then sure, why not go ahead and do something like that and give yourself a leg up? But for that kind of money, Tesla can do an awful lot with over $100 billion that they could sink into anything else aside from purchasing a company. All right, so that's what I've got today. Definitely let me know what you think about Gary Black's suggestion and Alexandra and my responses to it. And definitely let me know about uses that you can think of for the Cybertruck's differently shaped and designed frunk. I would love to know about that. Just let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, please remember to like the video so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my Twitter/X subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget, we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.